So here we have the three SandWing princesses from Wings of Fire. As any reader knows, Blister, Blaze, and Burn. So we're going to start by coloring in Burn. For each princess, what I'm going to do is mention my creative freedoms for each, with the character design, overall character design that matches the personalities, and how I think each one would have done as a ruler. So for Burn here, the creative liberties I'm taking with her character design, I know SandWings don't usually have this. This is much more of this dark patch here is more of a mud ring trait, but seeing as she's, I think, one of the most ruthless characters in the entire series, it only makes sense to me to give her a darker patch, because this often resembles a more wicked character. And for my own creativity, SandWings generally have just blacked out eyes as a whole. So I'm giving each sister an eye color that I think would match them best. I'm actually going to do it, these matching backgrounds I have here, with the background actually fades from, generally red is seen as more dangerous colors. Blue is more of a gentle color. So I'm also going to give Burn red eyes, Blister purple eyes, and Blaze these blue eyes. And those will each go into their character designs. I've seen a lot of art of Burn giving her different scars in different areas, or just not giving her scars at all in some instances. But almost always she's got scars on her face and on her body or neck somewhere. So I'm putting them in areas where I think would not only be scarred up in a fight, because they're more sensitive areas, such as the throat or the nose, but I think would make sense for a warrior who escaped a lot of battles and got out safely, while holding that mentality of, you should see the other guy, kind of. Like, anything that on her face, this one travels from her face to her neck, and anything on her snout and throat all symbolize very dangerous battles with potentially very dangerous opponents. What I'm going to do for her color, since she is very dark and dull, all three sisters are kind of dull in their coloration. Like Blaze, generally, even though I would draw her very similarly to Sunny, Sunny would be like a shiny yellow, whereas Blaze is usually drawn kind of creamy. Burn and Blister, I'd say, is probably the dullest color scheme, even in the books, like the graphic novels, I mean. So each of these sisters does resemble each other in the dull rather than the vibrant scale color. So what I'm going to do is lightly go over Burn with these really harsh browns to give her an overall dull brown background, because she is the darkest, I believe, and definitely the most ruthless. And then I'm going to go over her with some gold or yellow and see how that looks, so she doesn't just look like a mudwing. See, she's very mudwing-esque here, but I'm hoping that she will not end this way. Now, for her design that matches her personality, generally mudwings have much softer expressions, I believe, or a little more elongated. I made Blisters definitely more elongated, even though they do have shorter snouts as compared to other species. But I gave her a very broad snout rather than a thinner snout, and I gave her this bump here. It's a very small detail, but it's an aggressive looking kind of face. Big, broad, scary, mean. I did the same with her horns. I made them a little shorter than both of her sisters' horns, but also broader. Big and broad is usually a more intimidating character than long and slender, which tends to match intelligence, but we'll go into that when we get into Blister. This is so far just Burn. Now, as a queen, I think Burn could have potential if she wasn't, I'm going to say, a maniac. it's not necessarily that she's absolutely evil. I think she just has a sense of craving violence. And she may be able to rule her citizens in... I mean, sandwings aren't an especially nice species or anything. Like, they do have the whole scorpion's den, but that doesn't mean it has to be that way. And I think it's very important for sandwings to learn, for anyone to learn from their leaders. And if they have a very cruel leader, you know, with her whole creepy castle of oddities and strange trophies, we shall say, it only makes sense that she would be a harsh leader that would be very good at leading sandwings into combat with another species, for example, but she would be bad at leading her people in any kind of sympathetic way, and that is not good for any species that actually wants to have a caring leader. It's very important that a leader is able to listen to their subjects, not necessarily to always listen to what their subjects say, but if the subjects feel heard, then they are a lot less likely to turn against a leader. I feel that if Byrne ended up queen, the Sandwings might have ended up at war anyway with another tribe just because it's thrilling, and that would not have been a good state for the Sandwings. They would probably be in a very similar state as how we saw them when we entered book 5 of Wings of Fire. And just this yellow is not going to really do it for her design, so I think I'm also going to add some orange just to get a little bit of a pop of color. So here we have Byrne. She is finished. And we're going to move on straight to Blister, who had very good potential as a queen, but manipulation and deceit are not the way to get power, especially in this world. As we all know, it's supposed to be a fight. So in that way, Byrne would have won. But seeing as each sister is, kind of, it's the whole brains versus beauty versus brawn ordeal pretty much. Like, she really got all the brains. She really got most of the beauty. I think Blister's pretty. And she definitely got almost all of the brawn. And one of the reasons I went with purple for her eyes was just because it's the perfect in-between of the red and the blue. But also because purple, like a lime green, are generally very significant in terms of villainy. And it's not that she's especially evil, she's just very deceptive, and I don't think she would be a good queen because of that. This is me doing a quick touch-up on Byrne because I actually think that she would look better with a darker frill as compared to a lighter frill, which is perfectly fine because Blaze is going to get a very light frill anyway. There we go. Now Byrne is finished. On to Blister. When it came to creative liberty, she, both in her attitude and in, the way she and Byrne dies, which I'm not going to go too much into just in case there's anyone here who hasn't read the books and just wants to be like, oh, dragons, cool. She reminded me of a puff adder because, I don't know how anyone believes here, but I am a Christian and I believe in snakes kind of being like a deceptive, they're a symbol for deception. It's not just in Christianity, but just as a whole. Snakes are absolutely a symbol of deception. So throughout this whole line right here, where she has her black described, I tried to follow the basic look of a puff adder, where they have a medium color, then black, then kind of a whitish. Obviously, I didn't go white because this is still a sandwing and, a fictional dragon and not a puff adder. So, I followed that design for her, for Blister. And I also gave her black along here, the edges of her frill, partially because I just thought it looked better, and partially because it very much went with, it's just kind of like the cherry on top of her personality. And basically, since she is so sharp and so intelligent and so deceptive, it's kind of like a blackened heart. I don't really know how to say what I'm trying to say, but I hope you get it. Speaking of her intelligence, as you can see if you remember, like 5 minutes ago when I was discussing Burn's face shape, I did a very different approach. I did a different approach with each of their face shapes, but specifically for Blister, intelligence, especially with evil or otherwise just bad characters, malicious. I mean, not like written poorly. She was written very well, in my opinion. I think she was written the best of all the SandWing Queens. But queens, princesses, silly me. So I basically gave her very sharp and thin features, which are generally used for deception in comic creation and intelligence. And that is also why I gave her a very cat eye-like makeup look. Gave Blister a very scattered look. Burn. Oh my gosh, I just can't get their names right. Gave Burn a very scattered makeup look. I did very fancy and beautified look for Blaze's eyelashes. She also has the biggest eyes for her innocence, but we'll get into that in a minute. And for Blister, I gave her the sharpest, thinnest, most deceitful looking eyes I could for this specific project. How I think she would have fared as the SandWing Queen, I think she would have been a pretty good queen to her people, actually. Because if you just look at the whole book series, until the DoD really come in and start doing their job really well, it's not like all the tribes are buddy-buddy friendship is magic or anything, you know? It's much more... Every species seems to have some kind of selfishness within it. Although there is also love for their nation and their tribe, there is obviously also a disunity within the species. So Blister would have been perfectly normal, I think, as a SandWing Queen. She would have rolled with intelligence. She might have made alliances or enemies, but I think overall she would have done what was good for her people, but probably with some sort of selfish intent. But it's not like that's weird for a ruler. You may or may not have noticed these necklaces I'm giving each of them. Burn's is the broadest. These aren't necessarily meant to be sharp, but intimidating is still the most square of them. And Blister here has a more regal looking one. It has a sharp point here, which also exemplifies her sharp wit. And she's going to have one gem in the middle, because I think she cares more about appearance than Blister. But not that, oh my gosh. Blister cares more about appearance than Burn, but not as much as Blaze. Because I think Blaze just wants to be really pretty, because that's pretty much the only thing she's praised for, let's be honest. Well, she is very friendly, that too. And Blister, on the other hand, I think would want to look good for the same reason that, you know, anyone in any position of power in our world puts on a suit or an elegant dress, because it's professional and dignified and expected in a leader. And I think that would be why she put in the effort to look nice. And moving on to Blaze, even though I don't think she was written the best, she was still my favorite character-wise of the SandWing Queens, and I think anyone who favors any of the others can probably say the same. She was just the most likable, and if I came across any of these in person, and, you know, they were people, not dragons, obviously, I would probably want to befriend Blaze before either of the others, because she is friendly and sweet. And she may not be the brightest, but or the strongest, and even though she's very pretty, I think we all know that that's not the most important thing. I think her friendliness is very good. And let's start with creative liberty, though. Creative liberties I took with her was, I'm actually making these lighter points for her design around her eye, because that's a friendlier area where people tend to focus. And I'm going to do here too, just because she's cute. So Aside from making a few areas a bit lighter, I didn't take too many creative liberties. I did give her different jewelry than she's especially described as having. And I do give her the most bejeweled and rounded necklace. In the most rounded everything. And round is good for her for two reasons. One, because it portrays friendliness, and she is certainly the most friendly of the queens, the most genuinely friendly. Blister knows how to be friendly, but it's not it may or may not be a ruse in some instances, but she knows how to use her friendliness in a deceptive way, whereas I think Blaze is just genuinely a friendly being. And the other reason is because bubbly shapes, I'm not going to say they're necessarily known for also stupidity, but more so the innocence. And I would say that Blaze is a very innocent character compared to her sisters. And we're actually going to give her 2 shades of blue to play with here. This dark blue, and we're going to give her a light blue. Just because blue is also a more innocent color and good for characters such as herself. And I think this lighter blue will help also to express how bubbly she is in nature. Pretty much already described all of my creative liberties and just character design with her. So I'm going to jump straight into how she would be as a queen. So even though she was my favorite character-wise, I think Blister, out of the 3 of these, would have been the best queen. Just normal level queen. Like, Byrne would have started wars or something. Blister would have been like, maybe we'll have allies, maybe not. Who knows? But I think if anything, Blaze would be too friendly with other nations. I mean, like, the others paired up for strategic reasons. Like, Byrne was friends with Scarlet, who was also kind of crazy and bloodthirsty. Blister went with Sea Wings, which is just an intelligent move going underwater. No one thinks about that. But Blaze just kind of went to live with the Ice Wings and just kind of loved them in a way, like actually cared about them. And even though she is kind of ditzy, I don't think she would have put SandWings first. And as a ruler, it's very important that even when it's a hard decision, you need to put your own people first. So even though she is the SandWings' favorite, it is kind of good that this specific trio wasn't left up to democracy, even though I am in favor of democracy, because it would have ended up poorly for the SandWings, who would have loved her and then at some point fallen into this system of, oh no, we're in trouble because this and that and the other. She's too friendly with this group and giving them our resources. Or why aren't we taking this resource from this other people who we're allied with or something? She also seems kind of disconnected from her people. Like, she knows that they like her the best, but there's not really anything she does about it. She just kind of expects others to come in, make decisions for her, and place her in a position of power without her having to do anything. And I know that the dragonettes are important, obviously, but at the same time, and I know that there are a lot of dragons that try to control their decisions throughout the series, which I didn't like, but it was still good writing. It was very good writing to do that, because they are kids. I mean, they don't say dragonettes because they're old. And I think because of her innocence and naivety, and her belief that she is right, and I'll say her sisters obviously hold that belief as well about themselves, Blaze does not have the potential to be a good queen. She could be a very good friend, or something of the sort, but not a good queen, not a good ruler. She would be a good friend. Like, if they got to the point where therapy was like a deal in the dragon world, she would be good for that kind of role. You know, once she wizened up a little bit, which would happen with age and experience. But to rule a nation, to feed starving mouths, she's not the dragon for that specific duty. And with that, we are just about finished. So here we have the 3 SandWing princesses, or queens. You could really refer to them as either. Blister, Blaze, and Burn. I really hope you enjoyed it.